Hey everybody, today I am going to be talking about diversity in comics. But first, I have a couple things I wanted to talk about. So if you just want to jump straight ahead to the drawing and the talking, you can go to this time code right here. But for everyone else, I just wanted to say thank you. So it was my birthday earlier this month, and surprise, surprise, right on my birthday, this channel hit 10,000 subscribers. So thank you guys all so much. I really appreciate your interest and your support for the specific kind of message and approach and interest that I am trying to generate in this channel. This kind of recent growth has been totally unexpected. I started this channel in January of this year with 50 subscribers, and it took like 3 months to get to 200 and another 3 months to get to 1,000. And then in August, all of a sudden, one of my videos seemed to please the YouTube gods and it blew up. And suddenly here we are here. Actually, as of the recording today, we've hit 12,000 subscribers. So I really appreciate your support. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to all of your comments. I'm doing the best I can to answer as many as I can, but the truth is, I'm not going to get to all of them. I think last Thursday I spent an hour and a half just answering comments. I originally said I'm going to spend half an hour, and it ended up being an hour and a half, and I didn't even make a dent in all the comments. So I'm sorry about that. I love reading them. I love responding to them. I think there's some great stuff you guys are saying. I'm actually really interested in the stuff that's kind of been more critical. There's been some interesting critiques and observations, and I wish I had more time to respond to those. I'm going to try to if I can. But I also do have to keep my priorities straight. So if any of you saw my video on why I YouTube, you'll know that I am making YouTube videos all in service of a larger goal, and that is so I can make my art. And making my art always has to be the first priority, which just limits the commitment and time that I can put into making YouTube content. So that being said, I want to throw out some ideas for where I go forward from here with this channel, and I'd love to get your feedback. So, first of all, I've set aside time every Thursday at noon Mountain Standard Time to be my time when I upload new content. And I've kind of decided that that's going to be my time to really dedicate to answering questions and just engaging in the comment section. So if you really want to kind of give suggestions, get specific feedback, leave comments and get a response, showing up at that time is probably going to be the best time to do that. Second, I really want to get your feedback on what type of content you'd like to see from here on out. Most of the stuff I do are kind of these video essays where I'm making art while I'm talking about a topic, whether it's related to process or philosophy of making art or whatever. So if you'd like to see more of those, let me know. I also do have some tutorials, a few tutorials that I've put up, demonstrations, things like that, and even little lectures like the one I did on composition. I'd love to do more of those. Do you guys want to see more of those? So let me know on that. And just so you know, I really take it seriously what you guys put in the comments as far as your interest. I'm actually actively working on producing some content right now that's a direct result of things that were said in the comments and topics that were requested in the comments. So, please comment. I do respond to that. I'm even thinking of doing some longer form stuff, which I don't know if I do that, it might mean the content is spaced out a little bit more, just because of, again, my commitments I have right now. So tell me what you think. But like I said, I'm super glad to have you around. I really appreciate your support. And I'd love to help you sort out any of your art making problems, or just to kind of talk about cool philosophy and theory of making art. So that's all I got to say. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about diversity in comics, and I'm going to draw this. Okay, so today I want to share my thoughts about diversity in comics, which I don't know, I'm doing this. I'm sure this is going to be one of those ones that'll make everyone hate me. I've got to jump in and say something kind of controversial here. But To start, I should say briefly why I think it matters. There's lots of reasons why diversity is important, but art is an essential part of life. Stories are these constructs through which we perceive and understand the universe around us and our place in community and culture. With this in mind, ideally the stories we tell should be relevant in some way to everyone in our culture. Now, this can get really complex in a big globalized society where we have so many communities that overlap. And there's a place for stories built for each of these smaller component communities. But when we talk about comics, I think we are talking about creating stories that are relevant to society in the broadest sense possible. I think it's a duty in this sense, and one we should take very seriously. We don't think about rights as it relates to stories much, but I believe that everyone has a right to stories that matter to them. And, not that this is something that needs to be enforced by law or whatever, but it's something that as creators, we should take seriously and be sensitive to. Now, it's not like back in the olden days where you had a culture or a tribe where you had like one story and that was your little myth for your tribe that kind of taught you about your place and the meaning of life and everything. We have this giant mishmash of thousands and thousands of individual stories by thousands of individual creators. And every individual story can't speak to all of us. But hopefully the idea is that once you add them all up, the sum of them will be something that can be meaningful to everyone in some way. And so this is why diversity in comics and popular culture in general matters to me. There are other reasons. There's also the super important idea of giving the voice to the voiceless, which I think is super important too. But I think the one that I think about the most is just this idea of kind of representation, of making sure that we create art that really represents the world that is. So what role can I play in this? This is a tough issue for me, even knowing that it's important. It's not a simple one to sort through, and I want to explore the thoughts I have on the issue and put forward my ideas for how we best achieve this objective. I mean, first of all, I don't think it's always right to kind of artificially add diversity into a story. Sometimes a story needs to be the story that you know how to tell. And you can obviously see in my work that I'm not always the best example of diversity. I mean, my only real comic project to date is a story primarily about white men. I mean, there's one female character in it, but man, this story doesn't pass the Bechdel test by a long shot. And I think this is one of the challenges I face in trying to add diversity into my storytelling. I'm a white guy. My experience and point of view comes from my experiences in that regard. I'm best suited to tell stories about my personal background. And I think sometimes it's totally appropriate for a white guy to tell white guy stories. I remember watching the director's commentary to The Wire years ago, and I remember David Simon mentioning that they wanted to do more episodes about the Latino community in Baltimore, which they felt was a big part of the larger story they were trying to tell, but they didn't. And the reason they gave as to why they didn't do that is they just didn't have anyone on their writing staff that really came from that world and understood it. The Wire really worked as a series because the people that wrote it knew the world they were writing about. It was their story. These were writers from Baltimore that understood the point of view of the police, or from reporters in the newsroom, or, what it was like to be on the corner. So my first thought when I think about diversity is that the healthiest long-term goal for increasing diversity is to have diverse creators. One thing I think about is Moana. And however much I love Moana, and I love how it gets the Pacific Islander story right, it's only one movie from Disney. And I'm actually going to get back to Moana and why I love it later, so I don't want anyone to get the impression that I don't love Moana. But I do want to make the point that seeing the success of a director like Taika Waititi makes me even more excited. And he's going to be directing Thor Ragnarok which I'm really excited about. I absolutely loved Hunt for the Wilder People. And even though Thor isn't going to be a movie about Maori characters, just having that diverse point of view behind a big budget project is just as important as actual representation in the film. Which gets me to my next point. The other way we get more diversity in comics is to add more diverse characters. And despite what David Simon says, I do think this is possible even if you don't have personal experience with it. It just means you need to do some more work and research, and it means you need to think long and hard about what diversity means. If you are just making a character arbitrarily black or arbitrarily Latino and then just filling in the blanks with all of your stereotypes, then you're doing it wrong. As an example, I have this story I've been batting around for years, and the characters are all Navajo, or the more proper term is they are all Dine. And I think it's a really fun story. I'd love to be able to tell it sometime, but I don't have that experience of being Navajo and living on a reservation well enough to be able to tell that story as authentically as I want to. And I guarantee I would end up adding in a bunch of stereotypes in the attempt right now. And it's the type of thing where I would have to do a certain amount of research, and just right now I'm not willing to do the work it takes to get that right. And so I'm not telling that story. Like, that's not a priority for me to tell right now. I think it's easy to make a character black or Latino on the surface and pat yourself on the back, but the truth is that there are infinite variations and specifics within those really broad terms. You have all these different communities throughout the United States, but when you start looking globally, those terms become even more broad and almost as general as the term human. The experience of a Muslim Somali is going to be completely alien to that of a black Puerto Rican. Or, a Catalonian is going to be so different than a story about a Peruvian Highlander. You need to think about the culture and specifics that accompany those general terms. And I don't want to give anyone the impression that you should hold off trying to add diversity because you have to do all this work to get it in there. You have to make it happen. I still think it's super important, and you need to make your stories, more interesting and more broad than maybe you are first thinking about off the top of your head. But even when you look at the category white, there is this enormous cultural experiential variation with the whole white category too. You've got white Latinos. To give myself a little bit of credit, even though my comic is all about white men, at least it's about this time period and culture that's really less well known. It's kind of a point of view that hasn't been explored very much. I guess in general, just be an interesting and curious person. If you are a boring person, you're going to create the most boring, stereotypical diversity in your stories. And there are also so many other cultures lacking in representation that rarely get discussed. When was the last time you read a story with an Aborigine character, or a New Guinean or an Indonesian? Here we have this country that's the fourth most populous country in the world, and how often do you hear stories with Indonesians as main characters? But there are so many fascinating, interesting cultures in the world that deserve to have their stories told and their people represented. Take some time to think about this whole idea of giving voice to the voices you wouldn't have otherwise considered. So getting back to Moana, Moana was great because they went above and beyond when it came to research, which is funny because just as I was reading about Taika Waititi for this video, I found out that he had actually written some of the first drafts on Moana. So at least they made some effort to have a Polynesian creator contributing to the writing. But they also had this whole cultural panel drawn from the various Polynesian cultures that they could basically consult with. And, one of the cool things I got to experience working at Disney Interactive was getting to see some of their production notes. We were going to do some Moana characters for Disney Infinity and we got this big art Bible that just had page after page after page of all this amazing visual reference drawn from different Polynesian cultures. And obviously I'm not Polynesian, but I do live in a city that has a very, very vibrant Polynesian community. And one of my awesomest experiences this last Christmas was going to the Disney store after Moana was released and just seeing this little wall of Polynesians all around the section with all the Moana toys. It's really cool that they took the time to get the visuals right, but at least from the outside, it seems like they got the culture right as well. The characters just feel authentic. The way they interact, it feels authentic. The way they talk to each other. Again, I'm an outside observer, but it just feels true to me from what I know and from what I've experienced. So it's possible to do, but yeah, you need to do your homework. And I think if it ever becomes too easy, then something probably isn't right. And so there's kind of one last question I wanted to address on this issue, and it's kind of this question of like standing aside. If you are, like me, a white privileged creator, should you stand aside so someone less privileged or someone who might better increase diversity can have a spot? And I don't know what that specifically means. It's not like I'm in some sort of contest for one spot on some sort of like dream team of comic book creators or something. But I think it is something that does come up, and I'm a bit torn on this issue. In general, I understand the value of an institution like having an affirmative action policy, but as an individual creator, I don't think it's ever a good idea for me to pull back from what I do or to step aside. And the reason I believe this is I believe that above all else, like, we need to have good competition in the art world. We need to have as many creators making their best work. And anything that keeps an artist from making things more competitive is just not good for art as a whole. Now, at the same time, I think I support the idea of art awards being intentionally more diverse. There's kind of two things that awards do. They demonstrate the best work, but they also send a message to potential creators of what is possible. They kind of show a path. And there are communities where that message is more needed. And so that diversity should be a factor as we're giving out awards. Not that the quality of the work produced should be totally ignored, but I think at the very least, the diversity should be a factor, And I'd like to think it's not a zero-sum game, or that the best approach, again, is not for myself to step aside, but to support more creators from different backgrounds getting into the game. Let's just make the tent bigger and not kick anyone out. In that way. Once you're done with one, you're ready for another. You can just kind of keep going through them. So that's how I think through the issue of diversity. Obviously, a white privileged guy lecturing on diversity, I understand kind of the issues with that. I'm limited by my experience and my point of view. So if you've got another way of looking at things or a different perspective that you think could illuminate my perspective, please share it. I'd love to have a better understanding of how my viewpoint might be flawed. So like I said, that's just one point of view about how we can add more diversity to comics. If you have your own thoughts, please share them in the comments below. Please like this video, please subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.